In an ancient burial mound along the Scioto River in Ohio, archaeologists excavated 300 pounds of volcanic glass. The glass had been imported. Its chemical signature was precise and traceable. It came from a cliff in Yellowstone National Park, in what is now northwestern Wyoming. That is a round trip of roughly 4,000 miles, on foot, through terrain that had no roads for another 2,000 years. The Rocky Mountains are full of sites like this, places where the evidence runs well ahead of any explanation. That cliff is number 3 on this list. So are 14 others, from a mine, confirmed as the oldest documented in the entire Western Hemisphere, to a stone structure at nearly 10,000 feet that no living culture has ever claimed to have built. Make sure you stay for that last one. The people who know it best say it was already ancient when they found it. This channel covers the strange corners of the world. Subscribe if you want to keep going. Today, we are counting down 15 ancient sites in the Rocky Mountains that scientists cannot explain. Number 15, Castle Gardens Petroglyph Site, Fremont County, Wyoming. 45 miles east of Riverton, white sandstone hoodoos rise out of flat basin land. On their faces are hundreds of carved and painted circular shields depicted in 2 shades of red, 2 of orange, black, and green. Green pigment is described by experts as vanishingly rare in Wyoming rock art. 1. Researchers believe these were made between approximately AD 1000 and 1250 by peoples ancestral to the Kiowa and Apache before horses reached the region. As recently as 2025, archaeologist Lawrence Lohendorf published findings connecting them specifically to the Kiowa, placing their presence in Wyoming earlier than the written record suggests. The most famous image here was a 16.5-inch Polychrome turtle in a mosaic of 60 colored sections. It was chiseled off the cliff face in the late 1930s and stolen. Local rancher, L.C. Bishop made clear that if it did not appear at a museum, someone was going to get their legs broken. In 1941, it was anonymously donated to the Wyoming State Museum in Cheyenne. The hole where the turtle used to be is still in the sandstone. Number 14. Pictograph Cave, State Park. 5 miles south of Billings, Montana. 3 sandstone caves carved into a rimrock cliff, 160 feet wide and 45 feet deep at the largest. Designated a National Historic Landmark in 1964. Excavations beginning in 1936 recovered more than 30,000 artifacts. The 106 paintings on the walls span at least 5,000 years of human presence. Some images predate European contact. Others depict flintlock rifles and riders on horseback, added by later visitors on the same surfaces. Here's the detail that stops people cold. Among the artifacts recovered, barbed harpoon points made in the Eskimo style, constructed from caribou horn, found at an inland Montana site hundreds of miles from any tundra. Also, jewelry made from Pacific Coast seashells. Evidence of trade or movement spanning a continent. Passing through 3 cave mouths 5 miles from downtown Billings, you could stop there on a Tuesday afternoon. Most people drive past. Number 13, Legend Rock Petroglyph Site. Hot Springs County, Wyoming, 30 miles northwest of Thermopolis. A 400-meter sandstone cliff faces a dry creek bed in open scrubland. Running the full length of that cliff are nearly 300 individual petroglyphs across 92 panels. Some of the oldest images have been estimated at 10,000 years, based on archaeological testing by Wyoming State Parks. The most recent were added in the historic period. The dominant style is the Dinwoody tradition, figures unique to Wyoming's Bighorn and Wind River basins. They are large, sometimes 3 feet tall, humanoid but not quite human. Headdresses, interior patterned lines, something between a person and something else. For decades, Western researchers treated these images as art. Then, anthropologist Lawrence Lohendorf and others began working directly with Shoshone elders, and the interpretation shifted. The elders do not describe these figures as depictions of supernatural beings. They describe them as the beings themselves, called pawai, or water ghost beings. They appear at specific locations in the rock because the boundary between dimensions is thin there. As BLM archaeologist Mike Bees relayed what he was told, the images are where they are because the boundary between those dimensions is weak there. That is not a scientific framework. It is also not one that science has any tools to dismiss. Legend Rock is free, accessible with a key from Hot Springs State Park. It is among Wyoming's most important archaeological sites and among its least visited. Those two facts are related. Number 12. 9 Mile Canyon, Carbon and Duchesne Counties, eastern Utah. The canyon runs for 40 miles. Its walls hold at least 10,000 documented rock art sites and more than 10,000 individual images, the highest concentration of ancient rock art in North America by most measures. The Bureau of Land Management has called it the world's longest art gallery. Between approximately AD 950 and 1250, the Fremont people lived here. They farmed corn, beans, and squash, built irrigation systems, and constructed pit house villages on the canyon floor. They covered every available surface with petroglyphs and pictographs, including distinctive human figures with trapezoidal bodies found nowhere else on Earth. Then around AD 1250, they stopped. No massacre site, no mass burial. No evidence of a catastrophe specific to this canyon. The Ute people arrived later and added their own imagery, sometimes directly over Fremont work as if continuing a conversation in a language they had not been taught. The canyon is 40 miles long and is called 9 Mile Canyon. The Bureau of Land Management has attempted to explain this. Their working theory, as they have acknowledged in print, is a guess. The walls are still there. So are the images. The Fremont left no record of why they came or why they left. The Ute, who came after them, painted directly over the earlier work, as if the surface belonged to whoever arrived next. Number 11. Weatherman Draw, also known as the Valley of the Chiefs. South-central Montana, near the Wyoming border. In 2001, a businessman applied to the Bureau of Land Management for permission to drill for oil through a remote Montana coulee. He anticipated 10 million barrels. The BLM initially issued a permit. What he had applied to drill through was a site considered sacred by more than 10 tribal nations, used for over 1,000 years as a place for vision quests, burials, and ceremonial gathering. Petroglyphs and nearly 100 pictographs covered the canyon walls. Images and styles associated with the Crow, Comanche, Blackfeet, Eastern Shoshone, Northern Cheyenne, Northern Arapaho, and the Kiowa. Researcher Lawrence Londorf, who first explored the site in the 1970s, documented images he believes were made by the Kiowa earlier than their historical record in the region shows. The site had been deliberately kept obscure. Most non-Native Americans did not know it existed. To stop the drilling, tribal representatives had to make a choice: stay quiet and lose the site, or go public and accept the damage that visibility invites. Comanche Nation Representative Jimmy Arterbury said simply, "We decided to try to protect it at all costs." Drilling was ultimately prevented in 2003 through a donation of the oil company's interest in the land to the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The areas now open to the public already show bullet holes through the petroglyphs. The more sensitive concentrations remain closed. That is what protecting something looks like when you have no other options. Number 10. Platte, Niobrara, and Goshen Counties, Wyoming. When ranchers arrived in southeastern Wyoming in the 1880s, they found a landscape of thousands of excavation pits and trenches spread across 400 square miles. Someone had been there before them. An 1882 account attributed the work to Spanish conquistadors, prospecting for gold. The Spanish had nothing to do with it. In 1894, University of Wyoming geologist Wilbur C. Knight surveyed the area and concluded that Native American peoples had removed what he estimated as hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of tons of quartzite and chert from this landscape. The operation had run for approximately 12,000 years, from the Paleo-Indian period until iron trade goods arrived in the 1800s and made stone tools unnecessary. The material here was exceptional, harder and sharper than almost anything else available on the northern plains. Ceremonial objects made from Spanish diggings chert have been found in Hopewell burial mounds as far away as La Crosse, Wisconsin. Wyoming state historian I.S. Bartlett wrote that the remains at Spanish diggings cannot be compared in size, impressiveness, weirdness, and mystery to any other ancient site in the Southwest or elsewhere. He wrote that before anyone understood just how old it was. A site that ran for 12,000 years, and as of a 2015 BLM survey, it has never been fully documented. The full extent is still unknown. Something that large, that sustained, and the best explanation settlers had for it was Spanish gold. Number 9. Highrise Village, the Wind River Range, Shoshone National Forest, Wyoming. A wildfire had stripped the ground cover when archaeologist Richard Adams walked through a high meadow in August 2006. At approximately 10,700 feet elevation, he found stone-lined depressions cut into a steep hillside lodge pads, foundations for ancient wooden structures. More than 70 of them on a slope with a grade comparable to a moderate ski run. Adams began naming the lodge pads alphabetically. When he reached Lodge Z, he started over. Lodge A. He later wrote that trudging up and down the slope made him realize the site was as tall as a 30-story apartment building. By any measure, a 30-story building is a high-rise, hence the name. More than 30,000 artifacts were excavated: soapstone bowls, projectile points, bone tools, and wooden remnants from 4 of the lodges, preserved by the dry Alpine air. Radiocarbon dates place the earliest occupation at approximately 4,000 years ago, with continuous use into the 19th century. That predates similar Alpine villages found in Nevada by over 600 years. Adams calculated that women harvesting white bark pine nuts at this elevation, approximately 20 hours per week through summer, could have supplied 2,000 calories per day for roughly 50 people across an entire winter. The mountain was not a refuge of last resort, it was a resource. Since 2006, researchers have identified nearly 24 similar villages across the same range. The assumption that prehistoric people avoided high altitudes has not survived what the Wind River Range has turned up. Number 8. The Lindenmeier Site, Larimer County, Colorado, north of Fort Collins. Before 1935, the dominant view in Western science was that humans had been in North America for only a few thousand years at most. Then a Colorado judge's son picked up some unusual stone points on a ranch in Larimer County in 1924, and the Smithsonian Institution arrived 10 years later. Between 1934 and 1940, Frank H. Kahn Roberts led excavations that recovered 468 fulsome projectile points, among the largest such assemblage ever found, along with tens of thousands of additional artifacts. Radiocarbon dating placed the primary occupation at approximately 12,300 years before present. History Colorado describes the discovery as having turned the scientific community on its head. Folsom points are among the most technically demanding stone tools ever produced. Slender, fluted, symmetrical, requiring a precision that some archaeologists believe took years of apprenticeship to achieve. Among the other artifacts recovered here, scored hematite for red ochre, polished disc ornaments described as the oldest Paleo-Indian artwork found in Colorado, and a single ancient camel bone. The Folsom points from Lindenmeier are technically nearly identical in production method to stone tools found in Paleo-Indian sites in central Alaska, whatever cultural connection that implies has not yet been fully traced. The site is publicly accessible, open March through November, north of Fort Collins. The Ice Age hunters who camped in that meadow 12,300 years ago had no way of knowing they would reshape how humanity understood its own history on this continent. They were, as far as we can tell, just hunting. We opened this video with 300 pounds of volcanic glass traced from an Ohio burial mound back to Yellowstone. If that one caught you, drop it in the comments. A thumbs up helps these stories reach more people. We are heading into the back half now, and the weight of what is coming shift considerably. Number 7. Writing on Stone Provincial Park A. Ayacina P. Along the Milk River in southern Alberta, Canada, the prairie drops here. The Milk River has cut through the grassland over millennia, leaving vertical sandstone walls and columns of eroded rock, hoodoos standing 20 to 30 feet from the coulee floor. It is a landscape unlike anything in the surrounding plains. The Siksikaitsitapi, the Blackfoot Confederacy, have come to this valley for at least 4,500 years. Their name for it, Ayacina P, means in Blackfoot, it is pictured, or it is written. The park holds more than 50 petroglyph sites with thousands of individual works, the largest concentration of protected indigenous rock art on the North American Great Plains. The images span from approximately 1800 BCE through to the early post-contact period. As horses arrived around 1730, the subject matter changed. Riders appear in the panels. It is a visual record of a culture updating in real time, carved across centuries on the same stone walls. Western researchers catalog these as historical documents. The Blackfoot understanding is different. The sandstone cliffs and hoodoos are understood to be the homes of powerful spirits. The carvings and paintings are not representations of the spirit world. They are the spirit world pressing through the stone's surface. Each image marks an encounter, not an illustration. In 2019, UNESCO inscribed Ayacina P as a World Heritage Site, specifically under criteria for living cultural traditions. And the nomination process took 15 years and was prepared in partnership with the Blackfoot Confederacy. More than 21% of the park remains closed to the public, reserved for Blackfoot ceremonial use. It was Alberta's first UNESCO designation as a living indigenous sacred space, not a monument to something that was, but recognition of something that continues. There is a campground and kayaking on the Milk River. Somewhere beyond the fence line, ceremonies are still taking place that predate it by several millennia. Number 6. The Majorville Cairn and Medicine Wheel. Iniskim Umaapi, Vulcan County, southern Alberta. 5,200 years ago, while Neolithic farmers in England were placing the first stones of Stonehenge in Egypt was consolidating into a kingdom, someone climbed a low hill above the Bow River in what is now Alberta, and began stacking stones. The structure is called the Majorville Cairn and Medicine Wheel. At the center, a round cairn 9 meters across, 28 stone spokes radiate outward to a cobble ring 27 meters in diameter. It is the oldest known medicine wheel in North America. In 1977, archaeologists excavated the southern half of the central cairn and recovered more than 17,000 artifacts. The analysis showed continuous use from approximately 3200 BCE through to European contact, with a gap between roughly 3,000 and 2,000 years ago, when the site appears to have been dormant before use resumed. The cairn accumulated in layers over millennia. Who built the first ring of it is unknown. Scientist Gordon Freeman, who spent decades studying the site, argued that it functions as an open-air sun temple with precise solstice and equinox alignments. The Blackfoot Nation considers it sacred. Sweet, grass, willow, cloth, tobacco, and Iniskim stones. Ammonite fossils used in buffalo calling ceremonies are still left there by visitors. Of the roughly 67 known medicine wheels in North America, only 3 share this specific structural design: the Jennings site in South Dakota and the Bighorn Medicine Wheel in Wyoming. The Bighorn Wheel is coming at number 1. It uses the same 28-spoke pattern from several hundred miles away, with no documented explanation for the correspondence. The Majorville wheel was virtually unknown to Western science until 1971. Stonehenge had been drawing tourists for centuries by then. Number 5. Mummy Cave, Park County, Wyoming. The cave is an alcove in a volcanic cliff, approximately 150 feet wide and 40 feet deep at 6,310 feet elevation on the North Fork of the Shoshone River, 35 miles west of Cody. You can see it from the highway without stopping. From approximately 7280 BCE to AD 1580, it was used as a campsite. That is, 9,000 years of continuous human presence in a single river-cut alcove. Excavations between 1963 and 1966, directed by Robert Edgar and Smithsonian archaeologist Wilfred Husted, revealed 38 distinct occupation levels within 28 vertical feet of accumulated deposit. The stone projectile point sequence from those layers became and remains the master typological standard for dating archaeological sites across the Rocky Mountain region. Cultural level 36, approximately 1,200 years old, contains something almost never encountered: hafted arrows with original fletching still attached, bows, moccasins, a fire drill, coiled basketry, a bone harpoon. Organic materials preserved by the dry, cool conditions of the alcove in extraordinary detail. Also, in level 36, a naturally mummified adult male, covered in a mountain sheep robe, with a feather ornament near his left ear, placed beneath a small stone cairn. He is called Mummy Joe. He currently resides in climate-controlled storage at the Buffalo Bill Center of the West in Cody, pending repatriation proceedings under federal law, a process that has generated significant professional debate about how the site's broader assemblage should be categorized. Evidence from this cave supports the hypothesis that the northern Rocky Mountains, not the Great Basin, was the homeland from which Shoshonean peoples spread across the American West approximately 5,000 years ago. 9,000 years of people coming back to the same spot. Whatever reason they had, they kept having it. Number 4. The Powers II site, Platte County, Wyoming, near the town of Sunrise. In 2022, a study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences confirmed what researchers had suspected since the 1980s. The Powers II site is the oldest documented mine in North and South America, and possibly the oldest known mine of any kind in the Western Hemisphere. The earliest occupation dates to 12,840 years ago, during the Clovis period, the earliest well-documented human culture on the continent. People came here to extract red ochre, a form of iron oxide that produces a deep blood-red pigment. They dug into the hillside with elk shoulder blades and antlers. Red ochre was among the most ancient symbolic materials in human use for body paint, ritual, burial. East of the Mississippi, almost no natural red ochre exists in accessible form. This hillside in Wyoming was one of the very few sources on the continent north of southern Mexico, one of only 5 red ochre quarries documented in all of the Americas. The site contains more than 30 chipped stone tools per square meter, among the densest Paleo-Indian concentrations ever recorded. Some are made from stone sourced as far away as the Edwards Plateau in Texas. Red ochre found across burial sites from Kansas to Ohio may trace back to this single Wyoming hillside, 13,000 years removed from when anyone in modern science knew it was there. The site was nearly bulldozed during mine reclamation in 1986. Archaeologist George Frizen intervened. He worked at the site until shortly before his death in 2020. Fieldwork in 2020-30 suggested the deposits may predate even the Clovis horizon. Somewhere in that hillside, the timeline of human presence in this hemisphere is still being revised downward. Number 3. Obsidian Cliff, Yellowstone National Park, Wyoming, 13 miles south of Mammoth Hot Springs, just off the Grand Loop Road. A cliff face rises approximately 60 meters from the ground. The rock is black volcanic glass, formed from a rhyolite lava flow. Roughly 180,000 years ago, fractured into natural columns. In direct sunlight, it glints. An interpretive kiosk from 1931 stands a short walk from the road. For at least 11,000 years, people quarried this cliff for obsidian. 59 quarry pits and tool workshop locations have been documented on the plateau above the face. Thousands of flakes still cover the ground up there. Tool types made from this specific material have been identified at sites connected to cultures, spanning from roughly 9,000 BCE through the first millennium CE. Obsidian from this cliff creates edges up to 10 times sharper than surgical steel. That is why they came. The distribution of the material is what the evidence cannot fully account for. Artifacts from this cliff have been confirmed in Texas, Washington State, southern Alberta, and across the Great Lakes states, and in Ohio, at a Hopewell burial site on the Scioto River. South of Columbus, archaeologists recovered 300 pounds of Yellowstone obsidian cached in mounds approximately 2,000 years old. The Hopewell also traded copper from the Great Lakes, mica from the Carolinas, and shells from the Gulf of Mexico. Obsidian cliff may have been the rarest material in their entire exchange network. X-ray fluorescence analysis confirmed the origin. That glass came from this cliff. The round trip was roughly 4,000 miles. In 2009, archaeologist Doug McDonald's team found a ceremonial knife in the Hopewell style on a terrace above Yellowstone Lake. Unlike anything native to the region, someone left it there and did not come back for it. Number 2. Chimney Rock National Monument, Arcoleta County, southwestern Colorado. The mesa rises above the San Juan Mountains at over 7,000 feet. 2 stone spires project above the mesa's highest point. From most angles, they are simply geology. From one specific position at the top of the mesa, they frame a narrow slot of sky between them. That slot is the point. Every 18.6 years, the moon's orbit reaches an extreme, a phenomenon called the major lunar standstill. The full moon rises at an unusually northern position on the horizon. At Chimney Rock, when viewed from the ruins of the Great House Pueblo, the full moon rises precisely between those 2 spires. In 1987, archaeoastronomer J. Kim Malville of the University of Colorado demonstrated this alignment. He also established that the primary construction dates of the Great House, 1076 and 1093 CE, confirmed by tree ring analysis, correspond exactly with major lunar standstill years. The ancestral Puebloans built this structure to observe that event. They hauled timber from over 100 miles away and carried stone up 1,000 vertical feet. Chimney Rock was the northeasternmost, highest, and most isolated of all known Chacoan outlier communities. Satellite settlements connected to the cultural center at Chaco Canyon, 93 miles to the south. Malville described it as potentially the Greenwich Observatory of the ancient Four Corners region, a site that calibrated time for a wider civilization. By approximately AD 1125, the Pueblo was abandoned. The reasons remain unknown. Nearly 200 homes and ceremonial buildings have been documented at the site. The monument is managed in consultation with 26 tribes and is open May through September for guided tours only. The most recent lunar standstill period ran through approximately 2025. Anyone who visited on a clear night in that window saw what generations of builders had planned for them to see. Number 1. The Bighorn Medicine Wheel. Bighorn National Forest, Wyoming. The access road closes in October and does not reopen until July. Snow accumulates at this elevation even in summer. The final 1.5 miles is on foot. When you reach the plateau, you are above the tree line. the sky sits directly overhead. To the north, on clear days, you can see into Montana. The surface underfoot is pale limestone, rough and old in a way that stone at lower elevations simply does not feel. The elevation is 9,642 feet. The wheel is there, an 80-foot circle of white limestone boulders laid on the bedrock. From the center, 28 stone spokes radiate outward to the rim. Around the perimeter, 7 cairns. Stacked mounds of stone sit at measured intervals. A wooden fence surrounds the structure. On that fence, tied and draped and woven through the wire, are prayer cloths, feathers, fabric bundles, and offerings, placed recently by people who were here last week or last month. This is an active site. People come here to pray. In 1972, astronomer John Eddy began investigating the wheel systematically. His findings, published in Science in 1974, showed that the Cairn alignments correspond to the sunrise and sunset of the summer solstice and the heliacal risings, the first annual appearances of 3 specific stars, Sirius, Aldebaran, and Rigel. These are the same 3 stars used as a calendar system at the Majorville medicine wheel in Alberta, which is dated to 3200 BCE and appeared at number 6 on this list. The age of this wheel is unknown. A wood fragment from inside a cairn dates to 1760 CE, but that is a minimum, not a construction date. Age estimates range from a few hundred years to more than 3,000. No narrower determination has been possible. Here is what makes this different from every other site on this list. Not a single indigenous nation has publicly claimed to have built it. 5 peoples: Crow, Shoshone, Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Sioux. All have documented spiritual connections to this place. All of them use it. All of them consider it sacred. None of them say they made it. During negotiations for the site's National Historic Landmark designation, the Crow Nation stated formally that the wheel was already present when they arrived in the region. The tribe with the longest documented ceremonial connection to this site does not claim authorship. A Crow elder named Flat Dog, interviewed in the 1910s, called it the Sun's Lodge. He said it was very ancient. Pliny Kupus, the last hereditary chief of the Mountain Crow, fasted here. Oral tradition holds that he did so once alongside Chief Joseph of the Nez Perce. The site's builders are unknown not just to Western science, but to the peoples who have kept it sacred for as long as any memory extends. The wheel is open from approximately mid-June through mid-September. If you arrive and a ceremony is taking place, you are asked to stand back and be quiet. That is, honestly, the right instruction for any of these places. Every mountain range on this continent has sites like these still being found. Hundreds of them unexcavated, known only to researchers and to the communities who never stopped knowing about them. My personal favorite on this list is Mummy Cave. 9,000 years, the same spot, the same river. Whatever reason they had, they kept having it. Which entry surprised you most, and what did we miss? Subscribe if you want to keep going.